So Kalispera, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think we can start. Waited long enough. Welcome to the last at-large seminar before the summer break. And today I have the pleasure to introduce you to two speakers coming all the way from Berlin, Germany, one being Professor Stephan Schmid and Dr. Raphael from the Humboldt University. And just to give you a brief introduction into their bios, Stephan Schmid, to start with him first, studied classical archaeology at the University of Basel in Switzerland from 1986 to 1992, with an exchange year in 1987-88, I believe, here in Athens at the University of Athens. He was then a lecturer at the same university in Basel from 1992 to 1998, where he also received his PhD in classical archaeology on a study on Nabatean fineware pottery based on the excavations of the University of Basel excavations at the Nabatean luxury mansion at Santur in Petra, entitled Die Feinkeramik der Nabatäer in German, Typologie, Chronologie und kulturhistorische Hintergründe. And then after his PhD, he continued his long-term interest in the archaeology of ancient Greece, which led him to the position of the deputy director, or the scientific secretary of the Swiss School of Archaeology here in Greece, a position that he held from 1996 until 2002, which culminated in his habilitation in that year at the University of Paris, Sorbonne, entitled Boire pour Apollon, études sur la céramique hellénistique depuis du sanctuaire d'Apollon Daphne Foros à Érythrée et petite anthologie du symposium Ubienne. And I excuse my poor pronunciation. Immediately after that, he then became a professor for classical archaeology at the University of Montpellier III, a position that he held then from 2002 until 2008. Since then, he is a professor for classical archaeology at Humboldt University in Berlin, a position that he continues to hold today. His publications are too manifold to list in detail, but they very nicely reflect his widespread interests in the archaeology of the ancient Mediterranean world, as numerous field archaeological projects clearly show. And just to give you just the top list, most notably the excavation of the monumental Nabatean tomb complex in the Wadi Farasa East in Petra from 2000 to 2010, I believe, and then followed by several other projects in the city center of Petra that also continue up until today. Also the Projet Archéologique du Rocher des Ors in southern France, researching Bronze Age and Iron Age in Oppidum from 2011 until 2016. And more recently, since 2017, his focus lays, among many other things, on ancient Cyprus, most importantly the ancient polity of Idaion, a project that he initiated back then in 2017, first by evaluating and contextualizing the late 19th century archaeological activities of the German scholar, if one wants, Max Unfalsch Richter on that island. And now, very recently, since 2022, in cooperation with the CNRS Lyon, and the University of Frankfurt, he launched the project Kition, Idaion, and Tamassos, cities and territories within Cypriot kingdoms during the first millennium BC, in short, KIT, which aims at investigating the interrelations as well as the organization of territorial spaces of these Cypriot polities in the Longue Durée. And this leads me to the introduction of our second speaker of tonight, Mr. Raphael, who studied classical archaeology at the Ludwig-Maximilians-Universität in Munich, as well as the Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin in Germany from 2009 to 2015. He was then a doctoral fellow at the Excellence Cluster Topoi and the Berlin Graduate School of Ancient Studies in Berlin from 2015 until 2020, where he was researching socio-economical aspects of iron mining and smelting on the island of Elba from the 7th century BC to the 2nd century AD. And he received his PhD at the Humboldt University zu Berlin in 2021, entitled Insula Scorea Ferax, Studien zur Chronologie, Topographie und Ökonomie der antiken Eisenverhüttung auf Elba, also in German. After serving as a university lecturer at the Winkelmann Institute for Classical Archaeology in Berlin in 2021, his widespread experience in archaeological survey and excavation work from various projects in Italy, Jordan, France, as well as Cyprus, has made him perfectly qualified to become a postdoctoral researcher within the aforementioned KIT project on Cyprus. And without further ado, this leads me perfectly to the subject of tonight's lecture, being now it's a very small Kition, Idalion, and Tamassos, cities and territories within Cypriot kingdoms during the first millennium BCE, archives, GIS, and sanctuaries, spatial approaches to the religious landscape of ancient Idalion on Cyprus. So, thank you very much, Professor Schmid, Dr. Esa, thank you very much for coming. We're very much interested and very much looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Kennedy, for the invitation to be extended to the Belgian school and the Netherlands school here in Athens as well. I am personally very happy to be here tonight, to be able to meet some colleagues, some people, some friends I haven't seen for a long time. Raphael will speak first, though I'm not Raphael, but just a few words to specify not what we are doing, but why we are doing this and in what frame. Will Kennedy already said so, just to figure out where the pointer is. Which one is the point? Here. This is a small part, so to say, the tip of the iceberg of a project that is scheduled for 3 years, co-founded by the German Research Foundation and the Agence Nationale de la Recherche. Well, now I do have two of them here. Well, anyway, which bears the title already pronounced, dealing with the territoriality of Cypriot polities. Though there are quite a lot of polities on this, well, small, big, that's all relative, island, between 8 and 12, and nobody knows exactly how. Clearly, we cannot deal with all of this. So we decided to deal with Kition, Idalion, and Tamassos. You see here a little part of the work plan with the work package 3, I believe it is, that is dealing with GIS application to these territories. So why dealing with Kition, Idalion, and Tamassos, not only these 3, but in this specific row? Well, a part of it is coincidence, because you do need to meet or have met the colleagues you think you can work with, and this is the case here. We are very happy to be able to cooperate with the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Lyon, more specifically with Sabine Fourier and Anna Canavo, which are experts dealing with the site and the surroundings of Kition / modern Larnaca, Cyprus, on the one hand, and with Matthias Recke from Goethe-Universität in Frankfurt, who is working on the site and the sites and territory of Tamassos, while we are working to a certain extent on the site and territory of Idalion. And the other reason why we selected these specific 3 polities is that indeed, and that's quite an exception in our modern knowledge of the ancient history of Cyprus, they are directly connected with each other. To make a very long story short, somewhere where towards the middle of the 5th century BCE, the king of Kition successfully conquered by military action the territory, the kingdom of Idalion. Well, so far so good. His new title, though, was the King of Kition and Idalion, clearly underlining that something, the former territory, the former polity of Idalion, continued to exist. And again, a few years later, strangely enough, but apparently true, the king of Tamassos sold his kingdom, his territory, to the king of Kition and Idalion, probably being confronted with political realities, and get retired, probably at Amathus. And from then onwards, the king of Kition just became the king of Kition and Idalion, and newly had the official title of king of Kition, Idalion, and Tamassos. Again, indicating that yes, this was a unity, but within this big unity, there were smaller unities. And this very complicated story, we hope to be able to, well, not to resolve at 100%, but to find some triggers, some tools in order to work in a direction to enable for a better understanding of what is actually the territoriality of a Greek Iron Age polity. I think that was already too much, and I hope I did not take too much butter from the bread of Raphael, who is speaking now for the first part.
Yeah, also for me, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, the institutions. Also, Kalispera Sas. Yeah, and one again, thank you, Will, because before we came to KIT, one have to say that Will has done a postdoc also on the polities on Cyprus, especially the Iron Age polities, and he was more or less the first person, or let's say, the one who began all the research that I was picking up in 2021, 2022. Well. As Professor Schmid already said, we are dealing with the territories, or with the presumable territories or the hypothetical territories of the three polities, Kitian, Idalian, Tamassos. Also, if we don't maybe in the end have right borders or right lines, but we try to get a new approach to deal with these three areas, or these three surroundings around these three Iron Age polities. Therefore, we do some digging, actually digging really in the field. For example, at the Eastern Acropolis, in the sanctuary of Aphrodite, or of the sanctuary at the Eastern Acropolis in Idalion. We also have two ongoing PhDs. One is also concerning the finds of the sanctuary on the top of the Eastern Acropolis in Idalion, and another one is dealing with some finds at the Yalias River, also in the Idalian city area, more or less. And the other things, what we are doing is digging in the archives. And there already Will began in 2018 to dig up some of these archives, especially the archives of the Cyprus survey. The Cyprus survey, which was introduced or began by Hector Kettling in 1955. He took this work until 1959. Then it has gone to other parties. In the end, around in the 1970s, it was a bit, let's say, dispersed because there were no service officers and so on. And in the end, it's always been only a Cyprus survey that was not a systematical survey except for the time of Hector Kettling. So this is why we choose especially to deal with these archive material from the Cyprus survey, because Hector Kettling served especially very well very intensively the area around Idalion in 1955, and there are also several other surveys from later institutions that are around in the surroundings of Kition, Idalion, and Tamassos. When we start working in 2018, respectively 2021, 2022, we extracted data from the Cyprus survey archives in the Department of Antiquities of Nicosia, and I want to also to thank the Department of Antiquities for giving the permit to do so. Because all the data is already digitized in a program that's called CADIP, which took all the survey areas together from the different municipalities in Cyprus. And here one can see from around 100, and from these 850 sites that we collected from the archives of the Cyprus survey, I was able to relocate, and Will Kennedy in 2018 was able to relocate about 55% of these sites by using the old maps that are also attached to every single sheet, every single information sheet of every single site that were inventorized between 1955 until today. And this Cyprus survey is still ongoing, but it's more or less only based, or it's only working with rescue excavations or rescue surveys before building construction, and so on. Just to give you a clue how these CADIP entries, these digital sheets are looking. So one have always the name of the site in these sheets, then a special number, especially the Cyprus survey number, the municipality, and some more information, for example, the type of remains, the chronology of the remains, some comments, for example, the area of an ancient city. Here we are dealing with Golgoi. I think maybe maybe anybody knows about Golgoi, which is an archaic classical city. In this case, for the Cyprus surveys in 1960s, in the 1960s. Where they took the data, and it's deposed actually, and there is also some materials deposed in the ethnological museum, now the Hachikosti Kornesios mansion in Nicosia, where you can still find the finds of these surveyed site from 1960. There's also a map attached, which gives you some more hints. Where do you have to locate the site? For example, here, the attached sheet plan or the map sheet is number 31, plan 37. It is associated with the Cyprus survey in number 1482, which is Golgoi, as this ancient city we've heard of, which has been surveyed in 1960. And one can find this big surrounded area, by red surrounded area, with the toponym Golgois, and there's also the description inside of these CADIP sheets, so one can relocate the site and connect it with the data taken in 1960. For example, for Golgoi is this very important because the today's site Golgos is lying in the Turkish occupied area of northern Cyprus, so there are no further research possibilities at the moment possible to look for the site. It's also a site that's really close to the UN buffer zone. It's also a military site. And it is declared also, there is also more information on the map itself. For example, here we have these little A&Ms, which gives us some more hints that it's declared once for an ancient monument in the ancient monument list of Cyprus. On the same sheet, someone can see also some other circled sites which are connected with other CS archive material. And here, for example, we also get the information that we have in the plot 264 of this map sheet. This is north of today's Afienu, which is also in the UN buffer zone. Someone can see there's this mark, Iron. So we're dealing maybe with a sanctuary that could be located in the west side of the Golgoi city. And there's also still more archive material left that we haven't seen. For example, the administrative files of the Department of Antiquities of Cyprus will gain again more information, which is connected also with this map sheet and this number. So when we extracted all these map sheets, I began to georeference these map sheets by taking the coordinates of, or looking for the coordinates of the different corners of this map sheet. I mapped it into the QGIS, as the Geographical Information System QGIS. I mapped also the extension, for example, of the sanctuary. I took the right coordinate, and in the end, one can look on today's satellite pictures, for example. These ones are from the Department of Lands and Surveys of Cyprus. And you can also see the actual state of the site, even also with aerial photographs that are available from 1964. When looking on all the amount of Cypress service entries or CADIP entries or cyber service data that we extracted, there are some 56 categories or different types that are named for single sites. Especially the sites, especially types or categories, cemeteries, settlements, and singletons are very often represented, which is good for us because when looking at the territorialization, or let's say what's going on around these royal cities, Kition, Idalion, and Tamassos, we wanted to see the different categories of living habitation, or also sites where one can assume human activity around these Iron Age polities. And there are also some 29 sanctuaries already mapped in the Cypress Survey's data. The same is, or a bigger problem is not only the categorization of these sites or the typology of these sites. A bigger problem is the chronological indications given in the Cypress Survey data, which is dealing with around 152 different chronological indications. There's already the majority is really undefined, but there are still a lot of chronological indications which are dealing with the time that we are, or the periods that we are looking in for the Iron Age sanctuaries. This is the late Cypriot time, the Cypro-geometric, the Cypro-archaic, the Cypro-classical, and the Hellenistic periods especially. And well, at the moment I'm looking to get some more generalization between these different chronologies to get it in a better order and to get more information out of these 152 different chronological indications. When talking about problems with chronology and categorization or typology, one has always to look on the finds that are also attached with each CS number with each site. For example, there I took some examples for both surveyed in the 1980s, also surveyed by the same person, and categorized by different quantity of finds. For example, on the right side, you're seeing, on the right side, you're seeing a whole bunch, a lot of pottery, now dating also from the Archaic, but also into the Roman and even late Roman times, which is the amount of pottery and the types of material which were taken for giving the typology of an Archaic to Hellenistic settlement in Almiros. And the same person, for example, took only 4 shirts, 4 diagnostic shirts for a really, really big necropolis. We have around 154 square meters of necropolis mapped on the map sheet around Goufes. And this is this is a big problem, and this is why we have to go in future more in depth into the material studies of these CS data, of these CS sites. So the data that I'm working with, or we are working with, is not equal. It's not always weighted the same time, the same in quantity of finds, and also in the same in dating categorization. But at the moment, for the moment being, it's the way it is, and what we have to do with, what we have to deal with. So I went through all these sites. I picked up where it was possible the right coordinates, and at the moment one can look at the longue durée. And for example, here in the late Bronze Age, it could be seen very nice that there is a huge accumulation on the north side, more or less, of the river Ialias in the surroundings of Idalion, and there is already some activity ongoing in the copper-bearing pillow lavas, which will be for the future of the next periods be more and more important. And here you can see also very well what it is when not only taking into account the data of the Cyprus surveys, but also taking into account the data of the other surveys. For example, here we have a whole bunch, a lot of different sites, a whole lot of different sites in the Vasilikos Valley, and this is due to the intense survey that was done by Todd in the Vasilikos Valley project, and also in the Maroni Valley Archaeological Survey project by Manning and Swinton. The same counts also for the area around Athienu, and also for the area west of Tamassos. When looking on the Cyprogeometric period, you see that these big nucleus of late Bronze Age sites, more or less only north of the Ialias River, is dispersing into the valley of the Ialias. There is also, at the moment, less activity for the areas that we are studying, and which is always really strange for the moment is this lack of evidence around Kition. This could be maybe to a proposal by Sabine Fourier that the city of Kition, when you look also on the map for the Cyberarchaic period, didn't have a real big territory around his harbor city. In the Cyberarchaic period, the activity is continuing, it's augmenting. We have more settlements, we have more necropolis, we have more concentration of sherds, and we have also a lot of sanctuaries that are close to the city, around the city, and even far from the city polities, from the capitals of these polities. But there we will have more information when Stephan is taking over. Same counts for the Cyproclassical period, and to end also with our limits, chronological limits of the Kition, Idalion, Tamassos project. I want to show you what's going on also in the Hellenistic period. And there, for the first time, and what is telling the data so far, we have more activity around the area of Kition, but then we are dealing with a Cyprus, which is no longer territorialized between independent, or who knows, independent Cypriot kingdoms. Then we are talking about a political unity of the whole of the island.
I think one quite impressive part of Raphael Eser's presentation was the not very spectacular slide with the trace from the apothekus of the Cyprus survey, where you had a necropolis that is representing 154,000 square meters, represented materially by 3 or 4 sherds. And you had a settlement, which is considerably smaller, that is represented by a quite well-filled tray of pottery. Bearing this in mind, when looking at all these dots on a map, it becomes clear that, yes, you can say a few things, you can do statistics, but you have to be very careful and very conscious of the background related to these statistics. And basically, that there are 2 ways to handle this this problematic situation, you need a lot of data. You really need big data to be sure that what at the end, what is the outcome, can claim a certain reliability. And if possible, which of course is a matter of time, which is a matter of money at the end, you really have to go back to the sources. Raphael quoted 850 entries, I think. Of course, it is not possible in this first 3-year range of whatsoever project to see all the 850 sites, to go back to the material, to go back on site. It's only exemplarily that we are able to do this cross-checking. And this applies also for archival material in a more general way, which I will come back to in a few minutes. You may have seen that in the Cyprus survey of the area, there were mentioned 21 sanctuaries, but that is just the results of the Cyprus survey, mainly taking place in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, because when looking closer, already around the I think it's this one, around what is the central place of Idalion, bearing the name of Idalion, which is, well, can't see a thing, which is here. You have some 50 or 60 sanctuaries, if I'm not completely wrong, and a more or less comparable number towards and around other supposed or real central places. So we have an incredible amount of sanctuaries in these areas. And we can start playing around with the information, always, again, keeping in mind that it may not be as reliable, as good for one side and then another. For instance, we can look at the gender gap of sanctuaries. There is, in absolute numbers, quite overwhelming majority of sanctuaries being sanctuaries for female deities. I'll come back to the identification of these sanctuaries in a few moments. But however, there are also some male sanctuaries, and very few only sanctuaries that in all likelihood were devoted to two deities, one of male, one of female sex. Is this making any sense? Can we read out of this anything that would be related to the organization of these polities? For the time being, I would be very, very careful. Yes, you could say that towards the supposed, bearing in mind that these are just supposed border or buffer zones between what must have been the sphere of influence of Idalion, which is again here, and the sphere of influence of whomever was controlling the territory to the northeast, you have a certain concentration of male sanctuaries. And you could possibly ask the same question for the southwestern part, although, if you are really honest, as you can see, there are a lot of question marks, a lot of sanctuary sites where we simply do not have enough information to definitely say, yes, it's a sanctuary, but at the end we do not know to which deity, nor even to which sex of a deity it has been devoted. Another element we are looking at is huge size, life size, at least life size statuary in these sanctuaries, no matter whether they are male or female, but of course you can combine this kind of information. And here you have sanctuaries with at least life size terracotta statues, which is one of the characteristics of the Greek culture, of the Cypriot culture through all the Iron Age, through almost part of the Iron Age. You can do the same thing with at least presence of at least life-size statuary in sanctuaries, and this would yet give another picture as it is shown on this map here. And just one interesting point, the further away you come from an agglomeration, usually there is a tendency to call these rural sanctuaries, and sometimes you can even read the argument that they were for the people living in the immediate neighborhood, implying, although it's not even written like that, that these are kind of minor cults. And quite interestingly, and not surprisingly though, in the immediate surrounding, even within the borders of the agglomeration of ancient Idalion, of course you do have quite a lot of sanctuaries with at least life-size limestone statuary. But no matter in which direction, almost no matter in which direction you move and how far you get up to the presumed border zones with whatever neighbors, you still have very important sanctuaries with very important, at least size-wise, votives The same applies. Oh no, not the same applies. If we are asking for considerably over life-size statuary, called in publications usually called colossal votives or statues, related to the problem, where is the limit between life-size and colossal, and is over life-size the same thing like colossal? So again, it's like with the number of shirts in a tray or the quality of archives. You have to be very careful. The funny thing here is, or quite an interesting thing here is, that in the whole area under study, there's only one sanctuary, being the very important sanctuary of a male deity, probably Apollo, certainly Apollo, since there were some inscriptions found, in the outskirts of Tamassos, the sanctuary of Apollo at Frangissa. One thing we can do, and one thing we aim to do, is combining the information Raphael just showed on the slides with the evolution of the chronological evolution of settlements, sanctuaries, fort fortifications, or whatever, with viewshed analysis. And I will not give you viewshed analysis for 850 points, don't worry, but just to trying to show a certain evolution, very how to say, preliminary approach, showing viewshed of one of the Bronze Age settlements in the area, which is the site of Agios Sosomenos Nikolidis here, which covers, well, what does it cover? Parts of a little thing of everything. Parts of the central area of the Yalias River, parts of the plain to the left and to the right, but I mean, if one can say anything from one or a bunch of points of viewshed analysis from the same area, it doesn't seem to be a specific logic. This also applies for another very important Bronze Age, late Bronze Age settlement in the area, the settlement of Alhambra. Even when combining the two, Alhambra in green and Agios Sosomenos in yellow, the picture does not become extremely clear. Again, this is a very preliminary approach. The situation changes a little bit from the moment when the core of Idalion, the later city of Idalion, starts to be occupied, which is the case from the very end of the late Bronze Age, with a hiatus until the very end of the Cybergeometric period, and from then on the site is continuously occupied until the Roman period, although the density of occupation in the Roman period is not completely clear. This is a viewshed from the western Acropolis, if I'm not completely wrong, and this is a combined viewshed, from the western and the eastern Acropolis of Idalion, and now it starts appearing that apparently there is some importance given to the central stretch of the Yalias River here, which of course all through all periods was one of the main communication axes between the area of the Pillar lavas, where the copper, which is the base of the economic well-doing of Cyprus, was found, towards the sea, where the same copper used to be exported all over the ancient world on the one hand. And if I say communication axis, I do not necessarily mean by ship. It's also the ways people used to walk or to ride on donkey or on horses follow the same valley. And there's a second axe, which is the axe that follows more or less a northeastern direction here through the city of Idalion, and I'll come back to these in 2 or 3 slides. Yeah, we already had this one here. This very same axe, going one back. This very same axis here, cutting the river Yalias at this point in a right angle, is also specified when looking at the sanctuaries to a certain extent, because on both sides of the river, one on the left side, or the northern side, one on the southern side of the river, a couple of them in the city, and another row of sanctuaries along the communication axis sanctuaries seem really to flank and oversee one of the most important communication axes of ancient Idalian. Again, I come back to this in a couple of slides. Now we switch on to archive work, study of archive work, and how careful one has to be when dealing with archive work and information extracted from this. Not to 100%, but to an important percentage, our knowledge of sanctuaries in and around ancient Idalian is related to the gentleman on the left here, Max ohne falsch Richter. You see his lifetime dates. A self-taught German, well, a Saxonian at beginning, then German archaeologist who lived in Cyprus for quite a number of years, between 1878 until 1890, and then punctually came back for further archaeological work. He produced, with the help of professional surveyors, to be sure, one of the best maps of the area of Idalian and the city of Idalian, ancient Idalian, up to the present day. This map was first published in 1880-something, 1888, I'd say, in a very random publication. Only in black and white, of course. The colors were added to at a later moment. At a later moment, you can see the colors, in order to make better understandable the very narrowly and small written captions to the left and to the right of the pictures. Actually, the colors do signify different periods. He had other expression for the periods back then. I mean, we were talking for almost 150 years, but actually it goes from the late Bronze Age throughout the Iron Age and stops somewhere in the Hellenistic period. And then the different signatures, the different symbols, do indicate different type of sites, like sanctuaries. These are the circles, necropoles or built tombs. These are the triangles, etc., etc. Basically, the guy did exactly the same thing in a little bit more simple way than we are still trying to do today. One question, of course, is to what extent the map is reliable. Twofoldly reliable. The topography, how reliable is the bare survey work of this map, and how reliable is the archaeological information to be extracted from the map. I use this map in order with, very symbolically, with the red arrow to indicate you this one of these main axes I was just speaking of, which corresponds to the main axe indicated A by the viewshed analysis and B by the location of sanctuaries more or less along this red arrow. And the red arrow gives you rather exactly the perspective of this picture here. We are talking about landscape, and I'm very much afraid that's the only landscape picture you're going to see throughout the whole lecture. It corresponds to the point of the camera is at the beginning of the red arrow, more or less, and it shows you the two acropoles of ancient Idalian, so-called. To the left, the eastern acropolis, with one sanctuary at point I or L, another sanctuary at point C, at point B, etc., etc. Then you have the valley in between the two acropoles, and on the right, in the center of the picture, the central hill, that's the western acropolis, the main acropolis of ancient Idalian. Again, with a lot of sanctuaries, all these small letters here do indicate, should indicate sanctuaries. And then you have a couple of other hills, already extramural hills, but all densely occupied with presumed and confirmed sanctuaries. And the axe, the communication axe leading at the end, to make things simple, from Idalian, from the north of the Ialias River, across the city of Idalian, out the city of Idalian, and in direction of Kition, and that would be the red arrow, and that would be the saddle in between the two acropoles. Verifying the reliability of Max ohne falsch Richter's map and archaeological information. Therefore, we did a georeferentiation of the map and did go on the spot to verify all these information. And to make a long story short, it is very, very precise. The topographical work done by a professional surveyor working for the then British administration, taking over Cyprus from the Ottoman Empire in 1878, did an excellent job. This map is really exact with our modern understanding. As you can see, the georeferenced version on the left, and the same thing put on a Google Earth map on the right. Well, left and right, the other way around. which is an important tool, by the way, also for the modern archaeology, for the Department of Archaeology, to which we handed over this map with the corresponding information, because it gives you some hints where you should open your eyes when building permits are applied for. The archival material collected by Max Onefalsch-Richter, of which unfortunately a part, and quite important part, I'm afraid, went lost in between, does contain a more detailed map of the city of Idalion, intramuros, which indicating the presumed and verified stretches of the ancient city wall, and some photography, some photographs of the late 19th century, very precious material. The black and white picture, the black and white photograph, shows you the Western Acropolis, we've just seen on the map, and the hill with the sanctuaries just behind it, and it is taken from the Eastern Acropolis, and it's not very much of a surprise. Beaten earth track leading at the end from Idalion, from Dali, modern Dali, to modern Larnaca, is going in between, is running in between the two acropolis. Max Onefalsch-Richter left an important volume, or important volume in the sense of volume, of masses of text, both handwritten like here and more or less the same information typewritten, fortunately, which is a little bit easier to read. And starting with three information relating ancient sanctuaries from his map, and then asking some questions as to how much this is reliable from our actual perspective. Here the detailed map of the ancient city of Idalion with the presumed stretch of the city walls. Question mark, how do we have to date the city walls? It's kind of an enigma until the present day. Then you see the Western Acropolis, and I pointed just out some very basic information there. Research from the very first visits of antiquarians and historians at Idalion up to present date. They do locate a very important sanctuary, kind of a city sanctuary, of a female goddess named by inscriptions in both Greek and Phoenician, Athena on the Greek version and Anat on the Phoenician version. And as far as excavation were able to inform, it has a forerunner at the very end of the late Cypriot period, late Bronze Age, and then runs from the Cybergeometric III period to somewhere in the first half of the 5th century BCE. If you go to the only important publication dealing with the sanctuary, which is the final publication of the Swedish Cyprus expedition, working in Cyprus from 1927 to 32, publications a little later, the sanctuary stops to work, ceases to exist. But it is nowhere said it was destroyed, which is quite important, because in an important number also of modern publication, you can read that it was destroyed, simply because his ceasing his operation, his ceasing his function, corresponds quite well to the not exactly known date of the military taking over of Idalion by Kition. Nevertheless, there was no destruction to be observed by the Swedish excavators, and as well Athena as well as Anat continued to be worshipped in Idalion. Then we have a very important sanctuary of a male god, which is also known by inscription, Apollo Reshef, Apollo in Greek, and Cypriot dialect, Reshep in, again, the Phoenician inscription. And it works continuously from the later geometric period down to the Roman period. And we do have another, or maybe several, it's not exactly clear, sanctuaries of a female goddess of unknown name so far. It's just the great goddess of Cyprus from, well, maybe the late geometric, definitely Cyberarchaic down to the Hellenistic period, and we shall stick with this one a little longer. Because this sanctuary, pointed out here in red, it's a little smaller than the red circle, was excavated with a kind of a scientific aim, exclusively only at the end of the 19th century by the already mentioned Max Onefalsch-Richter. It had been visited, unfortunately, by a lot of, well, I wouldn't call them archaeologists, rather antiquities collector, just to do some name dropping, like Luigi Palma di Cesnola and other fellows, but it was excavated very punctually with a scientific aim in 1894-95 by Max Onefalsch-Richter, and after that only punctually visited with archaeological purposes. You see the location of the sanctuary on the few slides here, with the red arrow pointing out what is at the very top of the eastern Acropolis and corresponds to the modern house you can see on the picture on the very bottom of the slide. Max Onefalsch-Richter visited this site on several occasions, and he tried not only to draw the plans you can show on the right, but he also produced a series of photographs taken during his very punctual and quite short excavations carried out during only a couple of weeks in 1984 and again 95. Nevertheless, they are important documents because these are the only excavations we know of with a kind of documentation until the early 21st century. He further did produce a plan which he pretends being very exact, and again it is true as far as we were able to verify, just a very random confrontation between the Google Earth picture on top and Max Onefalsch-Richter's plan on the bottom. It is possible also to georeferenceize and to digitally draw this plan, indicating the different soundings he indicates on his plan. Don't ask me for the systematic, but every sounding has a number. So far, so good. And sometimes it sticks with the information he gives in his text. Here too, some of the soundings can be relocated thanks to additional photography. Here you see his wife, Magda Onefalsch-Richter, sitting on one of the walls in sounding N2. Northern sounding number 2. I'll come back to this in a moment. We continue. According to his catalogue of his find, plus some photography, it is possible to relocate, to a certain extent, some of the finds still existing today and some of the finds unfortunately being lost today. Here you see a very nice archaizing, late archaic or early archaizing statuette, big statuette, small statue of a Kore-like votary, which bears different numbers, and for us important is the N number, north, number 37A in blue and number 27 in red, which corresponds to different versions of his writings. And in short, it allows us to relocate this specific sculpture, some others as well, to the sounding N2, circled here in red. Others we are enabled to relocate to the different other soundings he indicates here. So almost every of his more than 400 finds in a couple of weeks, we are able to relocate at least in 2 dimensions. We almost have no information as far for the 3rd dimension, the stratigraphy, which it seems to me is not unimportant for archaeological purposes. Another trail we try to follow is the re-identification, the physical re-identification of the objects he found, which for a good deal are represented, documented by this kind of general picture he rather systematically took. And as you can see, after the print of the photograph, he added with handwriting in black ink the numbers which, well, in quite more than 90% indeed do correspond to the numbers in his catalogue. Sometimes he did some minor errors. Relocating means also dealing with the modern history of these finds. You can see what is his number 279 something. To the left of the colored picture, that's definitely the same head. The head was brought to Berlin in 1895. It went into the Antikensammlung, the collection of antiquities of the Prussian government, and it was considered to be lost after the end of World War II, and actually only some 9 years ago, it turned out by the publication of this very seminal work by Akimova, Kalinichev and others, that it was brought to the Pushkin Museum in Moscow with quite an important part of the objects from the Berlin collection at the end of World War II. And this is not the only example here. At least two more from this picture, not to speak about some other numbers from other pictures, went the same way. So therefore it was possible to win back for modern research quite interesting number of ancient objects that were considered lost since almost 80 years. Others objects, nevertheless, have never been lost. They were always there, but the provenance was not known. This is the case with the very beautiful Capitol, probably part of a votive and not of architecture you can see here. It was always known that it came from somewhere in ancient Idalion, but it was not known from where exactly, and thanks to the black and white picture with the note on the left, we can also relocate this in the sounding north too. I was pointing out to you. The same applies for this quite substantial stele, which I wish we would have the time, usually is considered as being a funerary stele. However, I think we should be aware of some Cypriot specificities, and I would not completely exclude it being also a votive in a sanctuary, but that's another discussion. It was found in two parts, not in the same sounding, one on the south of the Eastern Acropolis, the other one on the north of the Eastern Acropolis. And thanks to the documentation of Ornefalsch Richter, it is possible to relocate their respective find spot. These objects were found in secondary use, built in a massive wall, which is considered an extension of the city wall, making this specific sanctuary at a certain point, late 4th century BC, from an extramural sanctuary, we are talking about 50 meters, nevertheless, extramural sanctuary to an intramural sanctuary, second half of the 1st century BC, more or less at the time when Cyprus was partially friendly, partially military, conquered and integrated in the empire of Alexander the Great and later of Ptolemy I of Egypt. Now, at the end, I could go on and on. This verification of ancient elements is part of the PhD of Sophie Horacek that Raphael Eser was mentioning some minutes ago. At the end, and if time and money allows, we come to what I understand is nowadays called the ground truthing. Verifying on the ground whether what you think by theory and computer application and from ancient archives has a certain real base. This is why in 2018 we started doing a surface survey over the Eastern Acropolis of ancient Idalion, which you see here, and found, if you were trained in Greece or elsewhere and then you start working on Cypriot sanctuaries, you're simply blown away by the amount of finds. And you're also kind of blown away by the absence of architecture. So one goes up, one goes down, that's the way it is. The finds we were able to collect from surveying do confirm and do very well confirm the information we had from Ornefalsch Richter concerning the sex of the deity that was worshipped there. It's a female deity. Concerning the chronology, early archaic until the Hellenistic period in any case, and also the typology of the finds. It goes from very small to the left to over life size on the right for both categories of statuary, for terracotta and limestone. We have an overwhelming majority of female representations, if they can be attributed to a specific sex, and a very few male representations like the helmet, a person, very small helmet terracotta, you can see on the top. And we do have a little bit of chronological information by pottery, of which you see a representative sample here, including some Attic imports. Then we decided, still doing our ground truthing, to reopen one of the soundings, of the presumed soundings of Ornefalsch Richter, namely the N2 we have been talking about so far. Are we still okay with time, Dr. Kennedy? Yeah? Okay. Okay. The only sounding for which Ornefalsch Richter in 1894-95 did a plan which he pretends, like everything he did, that it is very exact and very true and whatever you want. You see the plan on the right side. You see the picture of the Acropolis with the georeference plan on top left, and you see one view of the excavation, of the re-excavation we carried out in 2019. This should be the area, in order to give you an orientation. Well, the wall over here is the inner part of the city wall, while you can see a couple of walls further to your right, and you can see a kind of an oval structure in between. I hope you can see it, and I wish I would be able to rework this thing here. Here, with the mouse maybe. So this is the slightly oval structure, which he pretends is a kind of basin made of mud brick. We did find the wall. That wasn't very difficult. It's approximately over 4 meter large wall, quite well built. And we did find some mud brick structure. That's the thing in the middle of the picture here. It looked like that. And yes, at the beginning we thought that we will have at least a part of the oval basin or botros. He wasn't too sure what he did find. But it looked kind of strange. So when continuing looking at it, it turned out that actually it is two walls. Two very straight, massive walls built with mud brick. I tried to figure out the alignment of the first wall here, and there's a second wall in the right angle, being a later addition, maybe only a day later, but they are not interconnected to each other. What is the oval thing? The oval thing clearly shows traces, remains of tools. Of modern tools, of modern pickaxes. Actually, this is the excavation of Ohne Falschrichter. And I mean, from now on we start guessing. This is what we found. This is how we can localize it on the map. We know that Ohne Falschrichter came to Cyprus in 1894 with his wife being pregnant in the very last days of her pregnancy, and that December 1st, just after the excavation, she gave birth to her son in Cyprus with a lot of medical complications and problems. We can only assume that Ohne Falschrichter was not on the spot from the early morning to the late evening, as he pretends, but that he had to leave every once and then for a lot of his business, but also for taking care of his pregnant wife. And that his workmen, when he came back, did show him this kind of oval structure, which he wrongly then draw into his plan, which plan he did himself all alone without the help of a British employed surveyor, which will become important in a moment. Nevertheless, in the backfill of the 1894-95 excavation, we again localized a lot of objects, which interestingly, not only typologically and chronologically, objects we found in 2019, objects Ohne Falschrichter found in late 19th century, do correspond, but also in quality. We do not understand why he took the objects to the right to Berlin and why he left the ones to the left on the spot and backfilled them. Again, one suggestion, maybe he had no time to really closely verify what his workmen were doing there. Just for the sake of the corresponding iconography and typology, this head with a high polos he found to the left, now in the Berlin museums, and in the center, the one we found in his backfill. And it continues with the small statuettes in limestone, it continues with the big terracottas, etc., etc. Also here the typology of this clearly female head, with a very specific headgear, does very well correspond to the ones, for instance, in the second row from the top on the black and white picture on your right. And again, the same variety of pottery from the Cyber-Archaic through the Hellenistic period. Just to pick out some quite interesting finds. It's not a very big object. It's a kind of a sphere from limestone, which I hope you can see. It does show some flowers with small openings, maybe inlaid with another material. The object itself is not very big. It's about 10 centimeters in diameter. It has very good parallels from the Cesnola collection, some of them with a fine spot, as good as this information is when we talk about Cesnola. Another one here, also from the Cesnola collection, which was sold in auction later on and ended up in the Ringling Museum, as well as the object here. And here you start understanding what it is, since you have the hand bearing the object. It is a bunch of flowers. Somebody even told me which specific flower it is, but I'm not very good in botanics. And they are known from a certain number of cypress sanctuaries, like here from Amatus, now presently in Paris in the Louvre, and another one from Amatus number A, the standing figure, and from Salamis in Cyprus, the one to the right with the letter B. And here you see, just because it is from Cyprus, a small-sized terracotta, either of Dionysos himself or from a Paposilenos holding a Thyrsos in a more or less similar way. Why? The object we found certainly belonged to a life-size statue. We continued the ground truthing with some real excavation, aiming at going beyond the excavation Ohne Falschrichter carried out. And this is why we started opening a few squares in 2021. This is the blue rectangle you can see on the colored slide, which are the results of geophysics carried out by Apostolos Saris, which I guess you know here in Athens, now in Nicosia. Being in the center of the upper part of the presumed sanctuary, about here. This is the site we are working since. The northern part of the excavation, which is here, clearly still falls within Ohne Falschrichter's trenches, as you can see from the backfilling, very summarily indicated here. Nevertheless, he didn't go to the ground. He kind of missed an important structure of a mud brick, which is possibly the continuation of the wall I pointed out a few moments ago. In the center of the picture, about here, we found clear indications of a level. Actually, there are two levels, one built in the Cyber-Archaic period, being either destroyed or went out of use by one way or another, and rebuilt in the Cyber-Classical period. And we found all over this large trench holes. I mean, you cannot call them differently. Disturbance of the stratigraphy that come from above and go to the bottom. These must be the holes of treasure hunters of the 19th century that actually are already mentioned by Ohne Falschrichter. And this leads to the strange situation that even on considerable surface, this is a trench of some 2.5 or to 5 meters, you have trails with archaeological information in situ, and 5 centimeters later, where you have the north arrow and the scale, everything is cleaned away, not by us, but by somebody else. And it even goes, in one of these examples, in the middle of the pair of feet, because what you see here is half a dozen of life-size, slightly over life-size feet, terracotta feet, being the, well, sad but important remains of life-size, slightly over life-sized terracotta votives in situ, all aligned at this specific area. And please have a look at the red loci pointed out on the slide on the bottom right. We extended the square meters of the excavation in order to be able to, well, accumulate undisturbed information if possible, which partly worked out. As far as, oh, by the way, if we combine the 3D models of the archaeological work we did over the years, it also allows us to repositioning Max Ohne Falschrichter's very exact plan, and you can try to turn it in which way you want. Either you start from the city wall, but then all the other walls do not correspond, or you start from the other walls like it is done here. It works out quite nicely, but then the city wall is a couple of meters away. So his very exact plan is not that exact, though we are completely sure that he worked indeed exactly at the spot where we were working, because we replaced Magda ohne Fallschrichter on the top, that's since 1923, 100 years later with one of our students, Tosca Nagelmann, at exactly the same spot. And the X you can see on both slides, this is the find spot of the Bottis, a water jar, late Ottoman, early British water jar we found there. That's the sample here in the middle. We found on the bottom, on the top, sorry, of the wall marked with X, why the best parallel for this spot is now in Vienna, in the Museum of Popular Art. And guess who sold it to Vienna? It was Max ohne Fallschrichter, who sold it in '89 from his personal collection. So clearly this, the pot in the middle is one of the water jars of his workmen. Coming back to our information, the terracotta feet I've just shown, they are situated here. A couple of meters further to the east, we have a slightly different situation. Again, we found one pair of terracotta feet. You see them pointed out on the slide here, but nothing else. If it is not negative, more or less rectangular, quadratic negatives. And since we found in the same area, corresponding bases of statues with their feet from life size to slightly over life size, we are pretty sure that these are the remains where they put the limestone statues in. So the terracotta statues, slightly separated in space, directly put on the rock, on the bedrock, with a only slight leveling of clayish mortar, while the limestone statues received a kind of a negative basement in order to be put directly on the rock. Here you have the feet, basically the foot and half a feet, consisting of two fragments. While the majority of these finds belong to the Cyber-Archaic period, we occasionally have considerably later finds, like this inscribed base plus the 2 feet. Actually the feet and part of the garment and a little bit of the other feet of a female statue. Female because the inscription says so. Daniela Summa from the Inscriptiones Graecae kindly provided a reading. Nikous, a female name, Hypertes Tygatros to be added. So Nikous, the mother, for her daughter Nikiu, and the rest is missing, and then the closing formula Agatei Tychei, probably. Unfortunately, it doesn't mention the deity. We were waiting for that, but at least it shows us that the sanctuary was working until at least the late Hellenistic period with life-size limestone statuary, and probably not of bad quality, because the best parallel is the statue, the over life-size statue you can see here, which, believe it or not, shows exactly the same combination of feet with shoes and clothes she is wearing, which interestingly enough was acquired from another of these treasure hunters, George Colonna Cecaldi, allegedly from the eastern acropolis of Idalia, which is our find spot. I guess I have to come to an end. In both of these zones, as well as in others, we have clear indication, and this is why I pointed out the loci marked in red, corresponding down here, which are a leveling filled with a lot of destroyed, but really narrowly destroyed elements exclusively from the Archaic period. You see a few here, they are all representing female terracotta statues, at least of life-size dimensions, all of them wearing crowns. Some colleagues call them deities, some colleagues call them priests of the deities. For the time being, it doesn't matter. We are simply on the top end, on the high end of the social representation of a statuary from this sanctuary. Nothing later than the Archaic period. Here a few other examples. showing mainly terracotta, over life-size terracotta and smaller scaled limestone figurines. So they were buried there, the whole area was leveled, and then come the life-size terracotta feet I've been pointing out to you. Within this presumed destruction layer, we found up to 8 or 10 fragments of arrowheads. That's already quite interesting, but we are not the first ones, because Max ohne Fallschrichte found the same type of arrowheads. So are we really talking of a military destruction here? We cannot date more precisely, although we do have a little bit of C14 data, then around 500 BC. We know that in the first quarter of the 5th century BC, Kition and their allies, the Persian army, tried in vain to conquer Idalion. Is this a result of it? We cannot resolve the question so far. So when talking about the organization, this is the third slide from the end, I think. The best information we have comes from Arja Irini, again excavated by the Swedish Cyprus expedition. It points out to a kind of a central focal point, that's the red square, the altar, and around it in a half circle, all the statuary, big and small, limestone and terracotta, and more interesting, all over the centuries, as long as the sanctuary existed. So nothing of taking away all the statuary and laying it down somewhere. They were all standing there and becoming all denser and denser, as the exposition in the Medelshaus Museum may indicate. In our case, the situation may be more linear, because all the feet we found and all the negatives of feet we found, they are all looking in the same direction. They are all looking perfectly east. And when checking out here, the picture was taken in late September at 6:30 in the morning. The camera is perfectly flying in the east, and the people here are all looking at the sun rising. So it seems that for many centuries, the votives, the statues in the sanctuary of a female deity on the eastern Acropolis actually were looking to the rising sun. I end with this picture here. It was done by Stephan, one of our doctoral students, and of course it's a fake. It's a fake in several directions, fake news, it's very actual information. He took a small-scale body we actually did found and which fits, with the oval-size feet on the bottom and a not at all belonging head on the top. Why are we doing this? Because it is in good tradition. Max ohne Fallschrichte published in 1893, if I'm not completely wrong, his seminal work about Cyprus, including this drawing, which is based on a real photograph. And he says so. This is statuary I found, mixed actually with some separate workments. And he also says that not all of this statuary is represented on the same size, on the real size. Angelika Walter, who is working on this sanctuary, pointed out one of the colossal statues on this drawing, and actually it can be triggered down to the present day. It's the one here, which is 28 centimeters and a half tall. So the kind of computer animated informative pictures we are doing today, that's not absolutely new information. And I think this is a quite good point to stop, not the least when looking to the watch. Thank you very much for your attention.